Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. It is a Wednesday, so we are here with some Harry Potter. This week we have Chapter 24 and just Chapter 24.
But Adrian, last week you just did 2 chapters, you lazy prick.
I know. But I think there's a lot of stuff here to discuss and a lot of the literary type discussions that we are here for, as opposed to just me bitching about Harry Potter. So I think that Chapter 24 and just Chapter 24 will do us some good to go through. Unfortunately, the downside to that is it means there will be Harry Potter on the channel for a little longer. So in Chapter 24, what happens? Everything is mum with Sirius and at Sirius's place until Snape shows up, and Snape and Sirius have a wand-size wand measuring contest, just a little pissing contest. We're 4.5 books in. Has there been a situation where 2 female characters have a wand measuring contest? Not that I remember off the top of my head. I might be wrong. If I am, jump in the comments section below and tell me about it. Once Harry gets back to school, he has to have occlumency lessons with Snape. Those lessons break him, and through the power of his scar, Harry learns that old Moldy Voldy is very, very happy. Now, as Harry Potter goes, this is my first time through the series, so feel free to discuss spoilers in the comments below, but if you want to address me and have me respond to you, start your comment with Adrian in capitals, A-D-R-I-A-N in capital letters, because in the preview of the comment I will be able to recognize that and see very quickly that it is something safe for me to read so that I do not get spoiled. And the first little thing that is unrelated to the greater thrust of this chapter that I want to talk about is a quote that comes to us on page 538. It reads as such: Harry found Ron and Hermione in the library where they were working on Umbridge's most recent ream of homework. Other students, nearly all of them 50ers, sat at lamplit tables nearby, noses close to books, quills scratching furiously, while the sky outside the mullioned windows grew steadily blacker. The only other sound was the slight squeaking of one Madame Pince's shoes as the librarian prowled the aisles menacingly, breathing down the necks of those touching her precious books. First off, what kind of turd does it take to villainize a librarian? What type of turd does it take? But we'll move on from that. This is one of those things that is interesting to me. Madame Pince. The Vice President of the United States, his last name is Pince with a different spelling. But in the future, when people look back on this, it's something that I wonder about, like 100 years from now, when someone uses the phrase trump card. Oh, he pulled his trump card. Are people going to wonder if that came from Donald Trump? You know what I mean? Because that's going to be, especially with as poorly as things seem to be going, with him attempting to bully, which is basically pulling a trump card. Is that something that people are going to hear and think back and go, oh, well, I wonder if that came from that? That little turn of phrase, did that come from the Trump presidency? Madame Pince being such a villainous and repressive character, I wonder if the future will endow this text with that reading. But the role that Snape plays in occlumency class is another direct position of authority for a male character in this series, JK. Now, we're moving past all of that now. All the things that get people angry at me. Though I have had a lot of comments recently telling me that this channel and this series in particular is the reason that someone has devalued the role of Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling in their life, and that warms my heart. But we're moving past that for the rest of this episode. We're moving away from judgment and we're looking with a discerning eye at things, just to observe, just to say things. The things that I will be saying in this next segment about J.K. Rowling, I don't think she would argue with. I think that she would 100% agree with. With this little occlumency thing, we are exposed to a couple ideas at play that are very telling about that particular mindset. Roiling under the surface here is leftism versus liberalism. Liberalism says that the truth, however vile, damaging, or dangerous, needs to be communicated fully, and communicated as precisely as possible, because only from that communication can a true solution arise. Leftism, just like rightism, I am not making value statements here, leftism and rightism both conclude in sensorial behavior. Those are things which are bad and not to be communicated. Those are things which we must not talk about. And it is telling that so many people, so many of these good guys, refer to Voldemort as he who shall not be named. So bad we can't even talk about it. Right? This is very telling about J.K. because it is the good guys who refer to him as he who shall not be named. It is the people who shelter Harry Potter who refer to him in this manner, because J.K. is writing from a very leftist point of view, not a liberal point of view. And again, I don't think that she would argue with that. But we have this character here of Snape, this character with which she seemingly knows not what to do. About whom she seemingly knows not how to feel, or wants the reader to know not how to feel. Though it's fairly well communicated that the reader's not supposed to like him, I think. But we get a lot of clues that the writer herself likes the character of Snape. Not the least of which is that he is trusted by Godhead Dumbledore, despite the fact that he is a Slytherin. And I can't think of any other Slytherin. Who hold that distinction, though possibly they exist in this series. This character, this Snape character, is the character who finally, in most of these situations, has been the one that sat Harry down and said, "Hey, stupid, stop being stupid." And that happens especially in this occlumency lesson. He gives Harry Potter a very swift kick in the ass and says, "Look, we're just going to throw you in the deep end, and you better swim." And further than that, even the name which Snape calls Voldemort, the Dark Lord, carries with it all of the information one needs to know about Voldemort. He is the Dark Lord. He is the Lord of dark stuff, bad stuff. All sorts of these bad things come from him. Versus he who shall not be named, which is a name that sort of leaves mystery. What are we doing here? Why isn't he to be named? So what's behind this is liberalism is very much of the mindset that bad ideas exist, and bad ideas have to be present in order to be shouted down in the streets generation after generation after generation, so that they may not creep up from the sides and take things over. Leftism is of the mindset, just like rightism, that if we do not talk about these things and people simply forget about them, maybe they won't be a problem in the future. Maybe we're just sweeping it under the rug. This does not appear to work, however, because through the annals of history, anytime a society loses a defense against a certain set of bad ideas, it is especially vulnerable to them. So that is the argument there. But on 536, we get this quote from Snape, where Harry Potter, upon learning occlumency, is unable to drain himself of emotion. Snape says, "Then you will find yourself easy prey for the Dark Lord," said Snape savagely. "Fools who wear their hearts proudly on their sleeves, who cannot control their emotions, who wallow in sad memories and allow themselves to be provoked this easily, weak people, in other words, they stand no chance against his powers. He will penetrate your mind with absurd ease, Potter." That is an interesting quote, because through much of this series, I have sort of drawn parallels between Slytherin and the Slytherin people, the Slytherins, Slytherin mindsets, Slytherin values, and nihilism. But this, I'm going to ruin sound for a minute here. What am I doing? But this quote here seems to be Snape arguing for Slytherinism being Stoicism plus nihilism. Stoicism plus nihilism. Which begs a deep philosophical question. What does it mean to be a philosophical opposite? Because we have a lot of ideas at play here, and it seems to be the Slytherin and the Gryffindor which constantly find themselves at odds. Why is that? And further, in the term opposite, do we necessitate opposition? Because the Slytherin, again, seem to be pitted against Gryffindor in these texts, and I don't think that is unfair to say. It is constantly these two houses which find themselves at clash. But the likely opposition of a will to power type of Stoicism is classically viewed as Epicurean hedonism, probably further and more specifically the lower realm of that hedonism, such as gluttony. But Gryffindors are not known for being gluttonous, or even for the higher bury yourself in academic type pursuits of Gryffindor, or of Epicurean hedonism, such as the extreme consumption of academic texts, despite the fact that that is sort of what is exhibited by Hermione. Now the Gryffindors are brave. In fact, according to the Sorting Hat, Gryffindor have bravery, daring, and chivalry. And boy, that sounds an awful lot like a knight, doesn't it? To be brave, to be daring, and to be chivalrous. Hypothetically a positive, knighthood, but what were knights? Knights were military tools of religious dictators. No mind of their own, and their morality came from authority. You know what a knight wouldn't do? A knight wouldn't question the king. Instead, he would blindly, dumbly follow orders. That's what knights did. You're painting Gryffindor into the corner of semi-knighthood. These knights, or these orders, would be sort of like the orders given by Dumbledore. No? The good king, the old king, who is sometimes seen as a bumbling king. Say the order given by Dumbledore to stay cooped up in your own house. It's a pretty strong order. So what are the values of Slytherin? They are ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness. these are the same types of values that might allow one to diagnose the fact that they are following a tyrant, much like the way that Snape seems to have done with Voldemort so far through this series. Diagnose the fact that he was following a tyrant, following someone that was not worth following, and he seems to have made a break with that. Full circle, this is because he was allowed to ask the questions. This is because he was allowed to ask the questions and reason for himself. He was able to shout down in his own mind those bad ideas. Hypothetically, I don't know, perhaps Snape is a mole. We've got 2 books left, unfortunately, I think, something like that, during which the monument of Snape might be deconstructed. So back to that initial question of opposite and opposition. The bravery of Gryffindor and the ambition of Slytherin do not seem like opposites, but they necessitate conflict in ways that the dedication, patience, and loyalty of Hufflepuff and the intelligence, knowledge, and wit of Ravenclaw do not. So despite the fact that they are not the exact opposite of one another, they are the two which are most likely to clash. And I think that that is a very interesting distinction to play with in your mind on a philosophical level, on a level as a reader. You know, how do we examine these texts in the Marxist way? Are these just constant, is everything struggle for power? And very interesting to think about as a writer as well. How do your characters enter into conflict with one another? But it is also interesting because of these things, possibly and probably, because literature is a reflection of life. This is interesting to think about, for example, with work. When you go to work, who is it that you're constantly clashing with? Is it because that person is the opposite of you? Or is there someone in the office even more opposite than you, but who's willing to just sit back and observe you and say, look at that asshole, at it again. So I think that this was a video and ideas which were worth presenting on their own. I am hoping to be back again next week with 25, 26, and 27, as I have not read that part of this text. I don't know if something else of this magnitude will jump up and jump out at me, and I will feel compelled to talk about it and ramble for however long about it in a video of its own. But if you like this sort of thing, leave me a like maybe, subscribe if you have not, and you are looking forward to the rest of this journey through Harry Potter. And if you would like to help me make more content here on Stripcover Lit, there is a link, as always, to be found in the description below to our Patreon. You'd read like a 2-bit hussy.